Ever wondered why the price of your favorite candy bar has doubled since you were a kid? It's not because they're using gold leaf chocolate, it's inflation. Inflation, in its simplest form, is the increase in prices over time. It's like a ghost that haunts the economy, quietly eroding the purchasing power of your hard-earned cash. Imagine if you could buy a dozen apples for $1 last year, but this year that same dollar only gets you 6. That's inflation in action. Now, inflation isn't inherently evil. It's a natural part of a growing economy. It's when inflation rates get too high or too unpredictable that we start to see problems. Imagine planning a budget when you don't know whether a loaf of bread will cost $2 or $20 next month. So, understanding the causes and effects of inflation is paramount in navigating our financial lives. So, inflation is an economic reality we all need to understand. Imagine running a bakery and the price of flour skyrockets. You'd have to charge more for your bread to cover costs, right? That's cost-push inflation in action. So, let's dive deeper into this. Cost-push inflation is essentially a form of inflation caused by substantial increases in the cost of important goods or services where no suitable alternative is available. This might be due to a sudden increase in the price of raw materials, a rise in wages, or an increase in land rents. The cost increase then typically gets passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices for goods and services. For instance, consider a real-world example. Let's say a major oil-producing country faces a political upheaval and its oil production is severely disrupted. This leads to a global increase in oil prices, a key raw material for many industries. As oil prices rise, businesses face higher operating costs. To maintain profitability, they pass on these increased costs to consumers, leading to higher prices for goods and services across the board. This is a classic example of cost-push inflation. Let's take another example. Imagine a scenario where workers in a country successfully lobby for significantly higher minimum wages. While this is a win for the workers, businesses might struggle with the increased labor costs. Again, to stay afloat, they might opt to increase their prices, leading to cost-push inflation. However, it's important to remember that not all cost increases lead to cost-push inflation. It only occurs when the cost increase is significant, and there is no suitable alternative available. For instance, if the cost of steel rises, but manufacturers can switch to aluminum or some other material, cost-push inflation might not occur. In the end, cost-push inflation is like a chain reaction that starts with an increase in production costs and ends with consumers paying more for their purchases. So, when costs push up prices, you're experiencing cost-push inflation. Don't you just love when economics brings a fresh perspective to your daily bread and butter? Now imagine everyone in town suddenly wants your bread because they've all got extra money to spend. You'd raise your prices, wouldn't you? Welcome to demand inflation. Demand inflation is an interesting creature. It's a bit like a party that's gotten out of hand. Too many people, too much excitement, and not enough snacks to go around. The basic idea is that when consumers have more money, thanks to a pay raise or a tax break, they naturally want to spend more. And when everyone wants to buy more at the same time, demand skyrockets. But here's the catch. Supply doesn't always keep up. Like a server at a bustling restaurant, manufacturers and service providers can only whip up so much so fast. So, when demand outpaces supply, prices rise. That's the heart of demand inflation. Now let's spice things up a bit. Enter interest rates. These rates are like the invisible hand that guides our spending habits. High interest rates mean borrowing money costs more, which can put a damper on our spending spree. On the flip side, low interest rates make borrowing cheaper, encouraging us to buy now and pay later. But here's the twist. Fluctuating interest rates can also influence demand inflation. When rates are low, people are more likely to borrow and spend, fueling demand. But when rates rise, borrowing becomes less attractive, and demand may slow, potentially easing inflation. However, it's a delicate balancing act. Too high and the economy might cool off more than desired. Too low and we could find ourselves in a hot inflationary mess. And let's not forget, demand inflation isn't always bad. In moderation, it can signal a healthy, growing economy. But left unchecked, it can lead to a vicious cycle of rising prices and wages, which can hit our wallets hard. So when demand outstrips supply, prices rise. That's demand inflation. But remember, like any good party, it's all about balance. Too much of a good thing can quickly turn into a headache, or in this case, an economic hangover. What if the government decided to print more money to stimulate the economy? Sounds like a good idea, right? Well, not always. Let's dive into the fascinating world of currency creation. Governments, through their central banks, can indeed print more money, a strategy often used during economic downturns to stimulate growth. This is akin to providing the economy with a shot in the arm, a quick boost to kickstart sluggish markets. In the short term, printing more money can have some appealing benefits. It can help reduce unemployment, boost consumer spending, and even help manage national debt. Imagine if you suddenly had more money in your pocket, you'd probably be more inclined to spend, right? Well, that's the general idea, but it's not all roses and rainbows. Like most things in life, there are trade-offs. And in economics, these trade-offs can be quite significant. So, what happens in the long term? Well, more money in circulation doesn't mean we have more goods or services. It just means there's more money chasing the same number of goods. This can lead to an increase in prices, a phenomenon we know as inflation. And here's the kicker. Once inflation starts, it can be challenging to control. If people expect prices to continue rising, they might start demanding higher wages, which in turn can push prices up even further. It's a bit like trying to catch a snowball rolling down a hill. The longer it rolls, the bigger it gets, and the harder it is to stop. This is why central banks must tread cautiously when printing money. They need to balance the short-term benefits with the long-term risks. If they get it wrong, the results can be catastrophic, leading to hyperinflation, where prices skyrocket and the value of money plummets. So, while printing more money might seem like a quick fix, it can lead to higher inflation in the long run. A delicate balancing act indeed, much like walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and it all comes tumbling down. Inflation isn't just about higher prices. It has far-reaching implications for our savings, investments, and overall financial health. The constant challenge faced by governments and economic policymakers worldwide is maintaining low inflation. It's a delicate balance, akin to walking a tightrope. On one side, too much inflation can erode the purchasing power of money, making our hard-earned savings worth less over time. On the other side, too little inflation can lead to sluggish economic growth, potentially causing job losses and business closures. In this ever-changing landscape, long-term financial planning becomes crucial. Strategic investments can help protect our wealth from the ravages of inflation. For example, assets such as real estate or stocks, which often appreciate in value over time, can provide a hedge against inflation. Just like unpredictable weather or human moods, inflation is a complex beast that needs to be tamed for economic stability.